Development. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilor Lydia Edwards and Councilor Kim Janey. I want to remind you that this is a public hearing and is being recorded and broadcast live on Comcast 8 and RCN 82, Verizon 1964, and streamed on boston.gov/citycouncil TV. Please silence your cell phones or any other devices. Do that myself. We will also be taking public testimony. We'd like to appreciate it if you would sign in, check the box if you wish to testify. And when you're speaking, please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to a few minutes. This is for public testimony and to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. Today's hearing is on docket number 0459 in order for a hearing regarding a biannual review to the Boston Employment Commission and Boston Residency Jobs Policy. With that being said, I'm going to open it up for opening statements from Councilor Edwards.
I'll waive it.
Okay. Councilor Janey?
Just briefly, or I'll try to make it brief.
You do what you need.
So I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly to my colleague, Councilor Edwards, for her partnership and her leadership. I want to acknowledge former City Councilor Chuck Turner, who is in the chamber. Hello, Chuck, for his ongoing work on this issue, not just from when he was a councilor, but continuing on to this day. I want to acknowledge the late Bruce Bowling, who is also a former city councilor for District 7, and his work on the council. We know we have this building boom in Boston, this huge economic opportunity, but so few of our residents are able to benefit. There's been a lot of important work on the council and certainly in the mayor's office, but more can be done to make sure that these jobs are going to Boston residents, to people of color, and to women. That's what I've tried to do in my 16 months on this body, work very closely with members in the activist community, the advocacy community, people from the monitoring committee of the Roxbury Strategic Master Plan Oversight Committee to really monitor all of the jobs in my district, particularly those in Roxbury, to ensure that these good paying jobs are going to residents in our city, to people of color, and to women. I want to thank the panel for their work in helping to monitor these jobs, and looking forward to having a fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Janey. And with that, I'll open it up to the panel. Whoever starts first, like I said, please just state your name for the record.
Thank you very much, Chairman Baker. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Councilor Edwards. Good afternoon, Councilor Janey. For the record, my name is John Barrows, Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston. I'm joined here by Selena Barrios-Milner, the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the Department of Economic Development. To her left, Chris Brown, the BRJP manager, and to his left, Sharice Hearns, Deputy Director of Equity and Inclusion. I want to thank you once again for inviting us to speak about the work of the administration on BRJP and our work with the Boston Employment Commission, both of which are priorities of Mayor Walsh and his administration. I want to thank the councilors for your ongoing leadership and partnership as we push to ensure that all Boston residents are participating in the economic growth of our city. I'd also like to thank the numerous community partners that have been important to this work, some already cited, that join us here in the chamber. They have become true partners in achieving our collective goals and ensuring Boston jobs for all Boston residents. As we discussed in our last hearing, together we made important updates to the BRJP ordinance. And now the city is improving and increasing capacity to be able to implement and oversee the ordinance, which is, and a central part of that is implementing a new content management system to strengthen our ability to monitor and report on and compare jobs. Going live on May 7th is the new Salesforce system that will allow us to effectively and efficiently monitor projects in real time. You will hear more about that shortly. This data will allow the city to create a transparent process by which to report on what's going on, but to also have a transparent process to find those projects not in compliance. Admittedly, people have pressured and continue to ask us to move forward on the finding part, and I'm confident that this system is a major step forward in allowing us to face that issue. Following the May 7th launch, we will create a subcommittee that will be led by the chair of the Boston Employment Commission that was asked for by the Boston Employment Commission to look at finding for at least one city project, the project at Dudley Library. The subcommittee will then make recommendations back to the Boston Employment Commission for how we deal with fines and the recommendation on fine for that project. The group will use the new data set to determine an appropriate and universal corrective action plan for projects not in compliance as it relates to fines. Currently, there is too much inconsistency in the history of fining and how we've come to that determination. The new ordinance allows us to have real clarity. The new data allows us to do the comparison on the matrix and the seven areas of compliance that we came up with. This process will ensure that most egregious offenders are penalized. We do have some good news. Through the Economic Development Center, we have launched a new equity and inclusion training series called Tools of the Trade that's dedicated to supporting Boston residents looking for good jobs in construction. Since the February kickoff, we have had over 125 workers interested in construction attend workshops and courses to help them reach their career goals. These are exactly the types of programs we need to better support our residents and their attainment of good jobs. Too often we hear from contractors that they cannot find the people to put on the jobs. And more we can do to identify talent, prepare talent, and create a pipeline, the closer we will be to hitting all of our goals. I'm now going to turn this over to my colleague, Selena Barrios-Milner, Director of Equity and Inclusion, to discuss the progress we have made and go into specifics on the future of the BRJP program.
Just before Selena, I'd just like to recognize our colleague, Eddie Flynn. Thank you, Eddie.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Selena Barrios-Milner. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion in the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. If you could turn to your presentations, I'm first going to start with the numbers. That's why a big reason why we're here today is our biannual report on how we're doing. So I want to start with the reality of where we are today. We're currently, we're going to be, the lights just get dim?
Yeah.
It's up on the screen.
I was like, it's gloomy, the numbers. So we're reporting on the last 6 months from October 2018 to March 2019. We have 4 private projects right now that are new ordinance projects and 45 City of Boston projects. Those fall in the following departments: public facilities, there's 13, Parks and Rec, 5, Public Works, 16, Neighborhood Development, 10, and Property Management, 1. The total number of work hours for the last 6 months is 292,177. Of those hours, 34% have been worked by Boston residents, 47% by people of color, and 7% women. Underneath, you can see the total for all projects, and that counts the projects we're monitoring that are under the old ordinance as well. So it's close to 4 million work hours, 27% residents, 34 people of color, and 34% people of color, and 6% women. So that's where we are today. But what I want to talk about is where we're going, because this hearing comes at a time when we're on the cusp of a major change through our, not only the implementation of our Salesforce platform, but we're also looking really at our process and all the tools we have at our disposal and how we can better leverage those to get more residents, people of color, and women working in construction. So beyond Salesforce, we've also started a new outreach and engagement series, which Chief Barros mentioned. What's really new about this series is we're doing workshops, but we've also added courses. So we're actually just wrapping up our OSHA 10 certification course, and workers walk out with their OSHA 10 card that they can get on the site with that. And so we're really trying to find what are the tools, what are the gaps that workers need where there might be financial or other barriers. We're also enhancing our Boston Employment Commission, and as Chief mentioned, we're developing for the first time a sanctions evaluation and enforcement protocol. So first, let's talk about the Salesforce platform. And I want to really highlight that this platform has been an interagency collaboration with the BPDA and neighborhood development as well, where we leveraged internal resources to both create a better product that builds off of institutional intelligence, but also saves money that we can really put into some of our programming and monitoring. So the first goal was to unify two agencies into a centralized system. As you may know, currently the BRJP projects are monitored both in our Economic Development Office, as well as the BPDA also has a BRJP monitoring unit. So this platform is really to get us all on the same page so that contractors have the same experience and community and other stakeholders have centralized data they can pull from. We are enhancing the current compliance process to reflect requirements in the amended ordinance. And we're also providing real-time reporting and analytics for all stakeholders involved. And I'll give you a couple of examples and screenshots moving forward so you can see what it's going to look like. So to take you a view into the past, there you can see a photo of one of our monitor's desks. As you can see, it's very organized, but there's lots of paper. And that's what the reality is of BRJP database today. The way that the system works is contractors send their weekly timesheet to our monitors via email. Those emails then there's data entry done to put them into the system. There's lots of errors. There's lots of inconsistencies. One week, a worker might be counted as a Boston resident. The next week, they might not. So all of that takes hours and hours to process, which leads to lags and inconsistencies. The other piece that I really wanted to highlight is that reports can only be pulled by one of the 7 compliance measures currently. So we can only easily pull reports, which you'll often see at the BEC, that detail payroll submission time. But all of the other 6 compliance measures are more complex to pull at a moment. So the monitors stay on top of that by manually tracking this data. But in the future, the Salesforce platform will get rid of this process of emailing, uploading, data entry. There'll be real-time reporting and analytics, and it'll really free the monitors up to spend more time on the site with the contractors, with the workers, and to really get more people on those jobs. So this is just so you see how it currently works. This is the home screen that we currently have in the Access database, and it's very transactional. There's a finite number of reports and fields that you can pull, and you push those, and then you get a PDF printout that you cannot easily manipulate. In the future, which is just around the corner, May 7th, we'll have a home screen that's really interactive and action-driven for the monitors. Unfortunately, it's not yet populated, but what they'll see there is it'll say, today, all of the following payrolls are due, make sure they get in. You have 3 site visits scheduled for today. Once you finish those site visits, you enter your site visit report. So you see everything at their fingertips, and the information is pushed to them rather than them having to pull it or manually pull it out of files and tabulate data. In the past, anyone that's gone to the Boston Employment Commission or any of the community meetings about our projects, you're familiar with this layout. These are fixed reports. So in any BEC presentation, for example, you would have a report that's the stat report, which is the BRJP report number 8, that goes through all the different contractors on site and how they're doing. Then you can pull those same reports by trade, and then you can pull those same reports a historical report for a specific contractor to say, well, they're not doing well on this. How have they done in the past? So these are all sort of very transactional. It's one-way information. So you press the button, you get that report. But moving forward, you can see that there will be a lot more data visualization. And you'll be able to see all of this data for a particular project or contractor interacting with each other. So it's not just a static PDF printout that then you have to really analyze, but the information will be there and visualized through a whole lot of different views. This is just one example, but it'll be a lot more visual and easy to act on. The other piece that I really want to highlight about this Salesforce build-out is that we've been very inclusive of the users and stakeholders with the system in its design. So we've taken feedback from community stakeholders as well as BEC commissioners. We had a demonstration last week that was attended by 16 leaders. We have a contractor demo this Monday. Any of you are welcome to pop into that if you would like to. We have...
Explain what the contractor demo is.
Yeah, so the contractors, because I've been talking a lot about the monitors, but for the contractors, they're actually going to be entering data straight into the system. So they're not going to be emailing stuff to us. And so they really need a deep training on how that'll work from their end. What's the job of the contractor, what's the job of the subs, and how all of that works. So they're going to get trained on that. And basically, they'll be creating a timesheet. That's what they'll get trained on. But every week, they can just update that. So it'll be, right now, they're doing sort of new Excel sheets every week. This will be something that they can just update. Oh, this worker.
We have that information instantly.
Instantly. And they can say this worker's now off the site, this worker's now on the site, and they can just add that in real time. So they're going to have a really deep training on that on Monday. And again, we have taken some of their feedback into account into this because they're the ones entering the information. We need to make sure that it works for them, but also, you know, ultimately, we need the data that we need. And so they're going to be coming on Monday for a demo, but we're also going to be offering trainings for contractors as we start to migrate projects onto the Salesforce system. We would like to also offer an internal stakeholder demo. We don't have a date for that, but you all would be, as city councilors, you all would be invited to that to see how the system works. I think this is one of those things that you kind of have to see it to really understand how it's going to transform the way we do our work. And there's going to be ongoing training and adaptation. That's really the beauty of having an internal team, is that if we start using it and something isn't working or we want to add a feature, we have folks in-house that can really help us modify that system. And then moving on to outreach and engagement, I just want to...
Selena,
sorry.
if I just may just put a fine point on this. Selena mentioned the in-house stakeholder demo and training. And so, you know, we, as we were talking about, I think we're ready to do one just for the counselors and their teams and send whoever you need to send to so that people are not only giving us feedback, but are trained and can access the reports and analysis that they need to.
Thank you.
So this is just so you get an idea of the types of sessions we've been doing as part of Tools of the Trade. The first one here was our Looking for a Good Job in Construction session, and there we had representatives of various unions and apprentices there to talk about the benefits of this type of employment and how to enter into it. And we had our monitors presenting about the BRJP program. We also, like as I mentioned, we have the OSHA 10 course, which was such a huge. It was, you know, we had a cap on registrations because the class only works with a certain amount of people in the room, and we had to open up a second class in June because the interest was so high. And right now, I don't have a photo in there, but we're starting in May our construction supervisor license training, which is another really popular one that people have shown great interest in.
Can I ask a quick question? So where do all these trainings happen, the OSHA training and the the construction
Yeah,
training?
so both of those are at the Reggie Lewis Center.
Oh, okay.
I'm
And is that
sorry,
where-
at Roxbury Community College, in one of the classrooms.
And is that where Tools of the Trade happens also?
Tools of the trade, yeah. This first round, we're doing everything. Our very first event where you saw the union representatives, that was actually at the bowling building. But the classes, because, you know, RCC has the classrooms set up and computers if needed and everything, the courses are happening at our RCC classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
And these courses typically cost, and we're offering it for free.
So the last piece under outreach and engagement is just a photo from our opportunity fair. And this was a really great opportunity for women and minority-owned contractors, businesses that to find out about projects coming up with the city and contracts coming up with the city. So it was a really great way both for people to learn about the benefits of certification if they're minority contractors, and also what opportunities there are both to bid on or to partner on projects. The last piece I'll leave you with is our new BEC, because we have two new commissioners. We have Kenel Broomstein, who is the business agent for IBEW Local 103. She's the first woman of color business agent there, and we have her voice and her advocacy with us. And we also have Stephanie Everett, an attorney who brings a wealth of expertise and also community experience. So I think, you know, there have been months in the past where we weren't able to get quorum. This new BEC is really engaged, and we've had quorum since they came on board at the beginning of the year. And we're also investing in their professional development, so they'll have a full Salesforce training as well. They have attended some best practices sessions in the past, and we'll be hosting more moving forward with BPDA. And we're planning a BEC retreat where both the commissioners and the monitors can learn together and share information about their work and monitoring these projects. And this will be the first time that we do this jointly with the BPDA, which I think is another important part of alignment, in that, you know, if you're a contractor and your project is being monitored by the BPDA or City of Boston, it's going to be the same experience. And so this is part of our continuous alignment, streamlining, and collaboration. Last piece on the BEC is just the improvements to the BEC site, and this came directly as a response to community feedback. If you go in person to any of the Boston Employment Commission hearings, you get, you know, basically an encyclopedia of reports. And they said, you know, why isn't this available online? I'd love to see this before the meeting. I'd love to share it after with people that couldn't make it. And so we've put all of that information on our website. So you can have both past and present agendas, all of those reports that go along with it. And we send out public notices for each of the hearings that also has all that information attached. And it's still, you know, it's still black and white and maybe not that exciting, but for folks who are really following this, it's a really win in terms of accessibility and transparency. So that's it for my updates.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to offer? Okay, so whoever this question is for, before I do that, I would like to acknowledge, Kim already did, but former Councilor Chuck Turner, and also read in for the record from Council President, dear colleagues, regretfully I am unable to attend today's hearing on docket 0459, order for a hearing regarding a biannual review of the Boston Employment Commission and the Boston Residency's job policy. I thank Councilor Baker for his leadership on this topic and look forward to reviewing the updates and next steps. So thank you. Where a week, and also we've been joined by Councilor Anissa Rasabi George. The tools, when we're sending people through the training, are we connecting them onto jobs on the back end, like in the tools of the trade there in particular? Do we have a pathway to connect them on to jobs. And this
Yeah.
is, and when I ask, it's for whoever wants to step up and,
Yeah, so for the tools of the trade, we invited folks that had applied to our jobs bank to come to the training, and we had contractors there. And that's where, the monitors asked their contractors who are having trouble getting people on jobs, they said, come to this session, we're going to have workers there available. So it was an opportunity for them to interview in person people that were interested in working. And so
and when you say contractors, are we involving small contractors, people that are doing like a 3-decker over that sort of, just anybody looking for labor?
So it's the projects that we're monitoring through BRJP.
Okay.
So if we have contractors that are like, I've had a really hard time finding a plumber,
Yeah.
a woman plumber, or a woman resident plumber, or anything like that. So that's part of what the Jobs Bank does, is to connect available workers to projects that need it. But yeah, that was a place where we did that directly. And
Is there an opportunity to expand that into smaller contractors, someone that may just be looking, for someone to get on a crew that may be a framing crew, or is there an opportunity there?
Charisse, you want
Yeah, there definitely is an opportunity, and we could try to reach out to, the smaller contractors. It's just that, obviously, the immediate need for us is the project that we work
Yeah,
on and
yeah.
getting the numbers up, so definitely.
Yeah, because I look at the jobs bank, where is that, is that run out of, where is that run out of? So where would you go to sign up for the jobs bank?
Yeah, so that's on our website, and under equity and inclusion, it's there.
Is there a physical spot to sign up?
So any of the projects that we're monitoring have an option for walk-on, people that want to walk onto those jobs. And part of the BRJP new ordinance is that those walk-ons then also get forwarded to the jobs bank. And so if they can't get them to work on that particular project, then they send them to us. That's one of those pieces we really need to strengthen, because it's really hard to know, like, did they have walk-on applicants and they
Yeah.
didn't send them? But there is a physical place. And then we also, John Dunham, who's the jobs bank coordinator, holds office hours in the office for people to walk in if they want to apply in person.
On a side note, can you send this committee some specific information on the jobs
Yeah.
bank, how, like, where it is, when it is? And I think it might be good if we could maybe open that up to smaller contractors, because that's a lot of the people that are looking for the labor, and it might be a good entry point.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll turn it over to Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. And the presentation is great, and having worked with Salesforce before when I was in OHS, I know that it's literally night and day about your efficiency and your ability to push out data. So I think it's great. I'm happy to see that you are also, taking away that excuse from some of the contractors, we can't find anybody. You're creating pipelines, which I think is wonderful. So you're hitting on both ends, both holding them, getting the data, getting it real-time data, but also saying, here's a pipeline. So we don't want to hear, I guess, how you can't find anybody. Here they all are. I think that's wonderful. I want to thank you for that. I think that you're also helping with making sure that the folks are getting on not real jobs. I don't want to ever come across as though I'm dismissing or categorizing one as a really tough job and another job on the construction site is a better job. But I do think it does matter, if everyone, what leadership positions people are given, what the demographics look like, who's running the show, who's just grabbing the tools and who's actually doing the work. So I think it's wonderful that you're doing the CSL training. I think that really you're helping more people become contractors. So I'm very, very encouraged by a lot of what I've heard today. I look forward to also getting information about the Jobs Bank. I will absolutely be promoting it in my district as much as possible to make sure. And hopefully maybe you can do one in East Boston, Charlestown, and North End, like take a road show. I would love that. I know it's at RCC, or you can walk
The
on, but if
bowling,
you
yeah.
can, at the bowling. But I would love to see you actually take it to the districts. In terms of following up then, so I have, Paul, but this is about, where we're going to follow up on some things that were left left unanswered last time. So I'm going to follow up on some of those things. The number one thing that's pressing me is about the coordination with your partners in the wage theft division. I know we have an executive order. I brought that up last time, and I have a real-life example of what just happened. On a city project, contractor worked, has not paid the workers. There's now a lien on that city project. So this contractor got this job, and they had the diversity. That's the thing, they have the diversity. And so now, I got a lot of folks who are diverse who didn't get paid. So I need to know, I brought it up last time, how that communication works when you're judging a contractor, not just looking at the data and saying, wow, we got, I think it was almost a team of Dominicans, so it's 100% people of color on that job, and they didn't get paid. So we met one component of the jobs residence policy, but to what end? And so I had asked, and I hope, now that you're coordinated and you're able to unify with the BPDA, your colleagues in the same department, right, under your leadership, Chief Barrows, when will you start to communicate with Wage Theft Division to make sure that the bad actors, when they don't pay their employees, don't turn around and be cleansed and become good actors because they got a bunch of women or a bunch of people of color? That was one of the follow-ups I'd asked for to hear about today. Another follow-up was about, I think at the time you were talking about several folks who were on probation in October. Not several. You had mentioned there are some contractors who were getting final warnings and dealing with certain issues. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand from your presentation, you might be looking to make your system more efficient before you turn around and do those fines. I understand that. But I still want to hear about those folks who are on probation in October. What did you say to them? How are you making them rise to the occasion? Obviously, they should not be able to shirk the law just because we're trying to come up with a more efficient system. So we have the wage theft, the follow-up on the those who are on probation. And then curious, I love the fact that you're going to have real-time data. It's real-time data for the entire public to see as well?
Correct.
Excellent, excellent. And then, so wage theft, the fines, and then finally, because you're now partnering, or not now partnering, I'm sorry, you unified it in your data. You were always partnering with the BPDA, but you're now unified in your data a little bit more streamlined. I'm really, Suffolk Downs, huge project coming in East Boston, right? 14,000 construction jobs expected, 25,000 permanent jobs. I know right now in the PDA, that's the Planning Development Agreement, there is a mention of the Boston Jobs Policy. I'm just curious again, with projects that large, I'm talking about the seaport now, where you could argue the data doesn't really demonstrate compliance with even the old jobs policy, with even the old Boston Jobs Policy. So there was a gap, massive project, lots of money made, how are we gonna make sure that we don't repeat that with Suffolk Downs? So just on 3 major areas: wage theft, the fines, update on that, and then also how do we make sure that we don't repeat what we did in the seaport? Whoever.
So as far as the pipeline issue is concerned, that's something that we've been working on extensively. All the monitors, especially the repeat contractors, the general contractors, when we meet with them, we're always encouraging them to reach out to different training programs, such as the Building Pathways, Youth Build Boston. So most individuals that are skilled in today's economy, they're working now. And so we think that by having these workshops and seminars, and also reaching out to the younger generation, high schools, and other areas that young people are in, this is a real opportunity with the way the economy is now. This is a big opportunity to expose individuals who normally would not be exposed to the trades, and to talk to them about the sign-up process, and also walk them through the process. We deal with a lot of business agents. We deal with all the unions. So I personally, and as a department, we think it's a pipeline issue, and it is really about getting the information out to individuals, especially in certain neighborhoods that they just historically haven't been aware of the process. Like a seaport, a project at the seaport, you just can't walk onto that project and fill out application and get hired and start working. So it's a union process. So they have to go to the union first. They have to sign up. They have to get accepted to the unions. There's documentation that they have to bring in terms with the application in order to get accepted into the union. So these are the type of things that we're explaining to the younger generation, and just anyone that's looking to get into the industry. That there is a process, and we're helping them with the process. We're educating contractors. We're talking about the importance of being a good neighbor if you're working in Boston. And I think we've made some progress. I know of one project personally. I guess I can name the name. It's the Harvard Science Project. Contractors have taken on approximately 20 individuals that are Boston resident that come from a training agency. Various contractors took those individuals on as apprentices, and now they have a chance to establish a career. So these are the areas that we're working on, the monitors work on, and we will continue to encourage contractors to go ahead and to help out in the apprenticeship aspect.
Thank you, Chris. Council, I also wanted to follow up on a couple of other questions. The wage theft
Yes.
question that you asked.
And I can give you the address. I don't want to spot anybody right now, but I think, I don't want that to be the issue, is that one incident. It's the system that makes sure there's a...
Yeah, we don't have to make that an issue of this conversation, but I would love to follow up with you on the specific site. We do have, I think, important that we work together to figure out how we might want to amend the procurement laws to allow us to both way past activities when we are selecting contractors. At this point, we can't. In past activities, I think we would associate that with wage theft. We could associate that and should associate that with performance on BRJP, right? But at this point, I think we would need to work together in passing the right legislation to give us the ability and the tools to wage that. But I still want to follow up with you on this piece here, because I'd like to work on that personally. On Suffolk, go ahead.
You're going to follow up offline, or you want
That's-
to follow up here?
I'll follow up offline on that particular project.
On that specific one.
Just summarizing what you said, though.
Yeah.
You think that for the wage theft monitoring, we really need to give you the power to do that through the procurement ordinance?
If we are going to consider wage theft,
I think we should.
I think we should. So I'll go on record to
So
say I
we'll need
think
to
we
go into
should consider
the
both.
existing ordinance and amend that?
Let me get back, let's come back
Okay.
together on the
Yep.
specifics on how, but I think I would add to BRJP performance, right? That I think the city should have the ability to consider past performance on projects as we select contractors,
Fair enough.
both on wage theft and BRG performance. And I think we would need to work together on that to give us the tools.
And with that, we would have a tool when it comes to direct city contracts. However, your jurisdiction is for also private
Right.
contracts as well, over 100,000 square feet or something
Right.
like that. So let's talk about where the amendment or language needs to go to allow for at least monitoring, since they have to give you data,
Yeah, very helpful. That'd be
Okay.
great.
You were going to talk about the PDA.
And then the PDA or Suffolk Downs, I think, so I think first and foremost would love your support in the budget process where the mayor has in fact increased our budget to be able to go to the different districts and neighborhoods and bring these trainings. So you'll see in the new budget about $142,000 that's now allocated to the Economic Development Center. So the mayor has asked us, in fact, to be out in the other neighborhoods, right? And so we look forward to hearing from all councilors on places where we should bring some of these trainings, particularly East Boston, as you said, for Suffolk Downs. I would love to tie it to Suffolk Downs. Timeline, when people are hiring. Let's be really smart when we have that many jobs that we are on the front end. Would love to work with you to make sure that that is true.
Excellent.
The other one, probations and organizations that have been on probation. I remember that in the last hearing, in fact, we talked about the actions that we take when someone is behind. Would love if somebody could actually give us a update on what's transpired. And I don't know the exact projects, but what's transpired since last time and now in general. On the specific one that the BEC asked for a subcommittee on the Dudley Library, at the BEC meeting, there were 2 BEC meetings, I believe, that happened before the BEC said, okay, we now need to figure out how we send a stronger message. And so now that subcommittee will meet. It'll meet in timeline to have the data that is necessary for them to do a comparison of that project with other projects and begin to really create the protocol by which we find, right? We have the standards. We know what the 7 are, and we've got to now figure out what's an infraction and $300 and how do we add it, et cetera, based on their performance and the other performance, and the data is going to allow us to do it. But if somebody can give the counselor a quick update on some of the work that we've done with the folks who have been out of compliance to date.
Yeah, so we started an initiative, and this is through the leadership of BEC Chair Travis Watson, who couldn't make it today. He's out of town, but he's definitely wants real-time updates on the hearing. But so we're one of the best practices that has been developed by the PGTI, which is the Policy Group on Tradeswomen's Issues, is to focus on what they called HIP, which is high impact poor performers. So looking at who's working the most hours in the city that's performing the worst. And that tends to be in trades where there aren't a lot of, so for example, concrete, there's 2 contractors that do all the concrete in the city, right? And so we brought in one of those, SNF Concrete, for a conversation about what are the barriers to you diversifying your workforce. And we came up with an action plan out of that. And those are documents that will be available moving forward. We're still sort of working with like a template of an action plan, but we're starting that. That was last month, I believe, that we brought them in. So we're starting to bring them in systematically, looking at the data. Who are those high impact, poor performers? Sitting down, what are the barriers, and giving them goals to set for themselves to improve that. In that particular case, the ownership had changed from father to a son, and the son seems, he's been there a few years now, but much more engaged in diversifying. And he also told us about some of the structural limitations of their industry and what the challenges are. So out of that, one of the lessons we learned, which is very applicable to Suffolk Downs, is that they're really finalizing their workforce about a month before the shovel goes in the ground. Even if they're planning a project for 4 years, who's going to be on that site is really being decided about a couple months to 1 month before. And so that's the opportunity to do a job fair on the site with the community. These are the people we need. These are the gaps that we have, because the challenge with their industry and with construction in general is that timelines shift so much. So you might have a great Boston resident crew, and then they all get laid off because the other job isn't starting for another 6 months. And so we're trying to, 1, get ahead of that, 2, really work with people, encouraging them to diversify their core crews, because their core crews don't get laid off. And so those are some of the pieces that we are intervening on, and tracking and trying to hold people to action plans, not just you come before the BEC, you have bad numbers, and then you keep it moving, right? So we want to really start levying sanctions with our new information, but also have these working meetings to really zero in on what, for that trade, that contractor, what's the intervention they need to really diversify their workforce.
Okay, are you okay? Counselor Janey?
Thank you so much. First, just let me acknowledge you, Selena, for the Good Opportunity Fair. I attended that fair a couple of months ago at the bowling building. That was wonderful. I also want to give a shout out to the compliance monitors, at least the ones that I work with, Robert from your office, and then Stacy from BPTA, for their good work. One of the things that is highlighted when we have these discussions around reviewing the numbers at the monitoring meetings are the timesheets, and some of the companies having what seems to be difficulty getting the timesheets in a timely manner. And so one of the things that I hear with your new platform is that they'll be able to just do that online versus sending an email. Both involve taking time to sit at a computer and do that. So I'm wondering, one, do you really anticipate that this will make things easier for those folks? And then two, I think with some of our smaller players, there's a capacity issue, and I wonder what role the city can play in helping to build the capacity of some of the smaller companies so that they can be in compliance. So they're not necessarily bad actors in terms of diversity numbers, but it's hard to know what the data says if they're not turning in their timesheets. And so one idea that's been floated is having a central person that could do this, like maybe a consultant could come in and do it for all of the smaller players, and not necessarily that it's the city's job to pay for that, but to help facilitate that. How do we ensure that we're building the capacity of some of the smaller players? So that's one issue. One question I have just around the new platform, is that just for your side of the office, or is that also for BPDA?
It's for both.
It's for both?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And is that data going to be available to the public, or is that just internal?
Yeah, and so I'll kick it over to Charisse, because she's really been the project manager for this whole Salesforce build out, and so I'll let her answer both how it'll be publicly available and also how cumbersome it could be for people that don't have a robust back office.
So there is an option in regards to the subcontractor's way of manipulating the system. The general contractors are the people who have the basically the responsibility to the city of Boston in order to report. So it'll be on the general contractor to actually report. If the sub has the capacity to do so, they can do so. But we are relying more on the general contractor to help with the reporting, and that goes actually through the general contractor first, just so that they have more accountability when looking at the weeklies and looking at that information that flows from their subcontractors to us. So they will have the ability to be able to do that themselves, or the general contractor would be able to do that for them. In the way of, I'm sorry, what was the other?
The other piece is
Making it available for public. It's not
how it'll be viewed by the public.
So the public view is really, again, more in the way of reporting, so that you can actually have real-time reports and the numbers that you're used to doing the FOIA request for, or a larger responsibility request behind that. Now you will have access to actually view more of what we have as our dashboard information that just shows the highlights of the numbers and kind of rolls up the sanction page for you to one view, so that you can kind of see everything for that project right in that one page.
And is the new platform going to then highlight which companies are MBEs and WBEs and which ones are union or non-union? Because that information, I think, is important to understand.
So it will
as well.
highlight union and non-union right away, and then we're moving towards definitely having the information on minorities and women-owned businesses.
Excellent, excellent. Let's talk about, I guess, shifting over to the back. So it's great to have Kenel and Stephanie on the back. That's wonderful. Someone mentioned, I don't remember who it was, a problem with getting a quorum at many of the meetings. How many open spots are available now on the back, if any?
We're at full capacity of 7.
Okay, and what is the policy then around absenteeism, and are we still having a challenge in that regard, even with the 2 new appointees?
So we've seen a renewed energy to, in the back, and we haven't had that challenge. But I'm going to have to get back to you on the specific, if there's bylaws or that specify. I know that that's sort of part of the back retreat as well, is that we really want to want to talk about what are the responsibilities and duties of the commissioners and see if people can really meet those and what they need to meet those. And we hope to also do a legal briefing, and so people understand, conflict of interest issues and all of that, since everyone has a day job and then they're also commissioners as part of their public service. And so we'll definitely address that in the retreat, but I can try to get that to you if I can, find if there's something specific written down around attendance.
That would be helpful. And my memory from the last hearing is that there hadn't been any recent sanctions.
That's great.
Okay. There was a lot of discussion about Dudley Library, which is in my district, and a project that I've been monitoring closely. One, because it's in my district. Two, because it's a multi-million-dollar project. And three, it's a city project, and the city should certainly be leading. I see a bunch of different numbers every time I get a report about Dudley Library. The total in terms of just the dollar amount shifts. So I've got 12 million here. I think last week we were at a capital budget hearing, and it was 17 million. Can I just get some clarity on how much money are we talking when we talk about this project?
Yeah, that's
Somewhere
helpful.
between 12 and 17 million,
Yeah, so I think,
for sure.
so it is, we have it on record as 12.2, 12.275.
Yeah.
We might not have all of the, any changes that need to be made in order to keep up with any additional costs. So it could be that, like other projects, the Dudley Library is costing more than the original
anticipated,
estimates.
yeah.
So when it was filed with us, it was filed at 12.257.
And do you have the latest stats for this project?
Yes, we do.
Do you have it, Craig?
Right now,
As
in
of
terms
today's
of,
date?
as of today's date, if this is current, we've got,
Most
is it
current.
current?
So as of today, I ran this report before coming earlier. So we've had 35,100 total project hours. 29% are Boston resident hours, 49% people of color hours, and approximately 5% female hours.
Okay. So one thing I want to highlight here is something that I've observed is that while with the people of color category we see, so number one, let's start here. Those are the overall numbers, and we really need to see good numbers trade by trade. So we all agree to that that's what the ordinance says, and we need to see it trade by trade. And I'm not going to ask you to give me trade by trade right now in this hearing. But the other thing that I think is important to just highlight is this pattern, at least that I'm seeing, is that we seem to be doing a better job in some of these projects with people of color, but are seeing sharp declines in terms of residents. And I wonder, and it's, it's only speculation, how much of that is due to the rising cost of living in our city and the number of residents who are being forced to look outside of our city for housing, who may be people of color. So maybe we're doing a good job at keeping those numbers up in terms of people of color, but not doing a good job at making sure that we're actually getting Boston residents, and specifically people of color from Boston, on these jobs. And so I don't know if you have any insight or thinking about how we can up the numbers for Boston residents to make sure that these jobs are going to people in our city.
Yeah, I think your observation is correct. It's correct currently. It's correct historically. That in fact, resident numbers have trailed. The mayor increased the resident percentage on BRJP in the last ordinance to make a statement. It's important, right? And so moved it up to 51%, knowing that historically it has trailed. So we need to get back to you on how we can together work on making sure that residents are more a part of the jobs.
Right.
Anecdotally, I will chime in and ask folks to chime in. When we've asked the question, we hear a lot about residents being able to pick and choose on some of the jobs that are happening here. We hear a lot about it's nice to be on a long job, like the casino job, and that's made it a challenge for some. We hear that many of the union residents have moved out of the city. So there are different things that we've heard, but that's all anecdotal, right? And I think we need to get back to you. Maybe let's have some interviews or talk to some folks and get back to you on some information on why.
Yep. And on the pipeline piece, which I think is so important, so I do want to make sure that we're doing much more. It's encouraging to hear your work, Selena, with the concrete company that you mentioned, that they are trying to do more to make sure that they are that they're hiring diverse workers, which is great. But we need to do a lot more in terms of the pipeline. I'd like to understand more about the jobs bank. I appreciate the questions from my colleagues earlier. When you say office hours, where is this office?
Over at our office, 26 Court Street.
Okay. And I would suggest that perhaps having some office hours that rotate out in different communities may be something to think about, making this much more accessible to the people, at least that I'm trying to help in my community, know about this, have access to the information. I think that's helpful. I would like to know how many people are currently in the jobs bank, how many people who've been hired already, how many people are in the pipeline getting ready to go on a job. Do you have those numbers for us?
Right. So in general, I think the jobs bank database consists of about 800 different individuals. So, but this is going back years. What happens is a person who's seeking employment, they either fill out application on a job, one of the BRJP jobs, or online, and so that person's information populates onto the jobs bank into a spreadsheet with the jobs bank coordinator. And most of those individuals are laborers, unskilled laborers. I would say 95% of the individuals that are seeking employment through the jobs bank are unskilled laborers. So what we're doing is we're steering those individuals to different training programs to get training, because we believe that when a person goes through the training program, they have them show up on they assess them, they have to show up on time.
How many have gone through a training program?
Through our department, I don't want to speculate, but we have sent a number of individuals to Youth Build Boston, the Building Pathways, and Operation Exit.
Yeah. So I don't want you to speculate. I'm asking for hard information, hard data on how many. I think it's important that we track. So I'm not sure if there's a system or structure in place for really tracking that, but I think it's important because that's how we're going to be able to measure success and whether or not this training program is having more success than that training program, and then how do we funnel more people into that particular one. So I think it's just really important to kind of understand how. I'm really interested in understanding whether or not we are tracking what is happening with these 800 people. I venture to guess that all 800 people aren't currently looking for construction jobs, so that many of these folks may have a job somewhere else, or maybe they've given up on construction. I don't know what they're doing. So I think the more that we can understand, when someone comes to the jobs bank, what the opportunities are for them and how we're tracking them from they've applied to they've sent us their information, and here's what the city has done in terms of getting them on a job site, getting them into a program, whatever it is, but making sure that that data and that information is really being tracked in a way that will help us really measure and monitor whether or not we're doing the job that we all want to do in terms of making sure that Boston residents, people of color, are getting served, as well as women. When they walk on a job site, what are we doing to encourage that job to actually forward the information? How do we know that the job sites are forwarding information of walk-on applicants or not?
So the monitors have regular interactions with those projects, and that's part of their, especially for the larger projects where there's quarterly meetings. that's one of the pieces they check in about. So show me that you've requested a worker, share any applications you've had.
Okay.
Usually it happens over email in between meetings, but they are, on the site, in their faces, on the phone all the time, and that's one of the things that they check in about. I am going to say it's not where the majority of people are coming from. It's,
Okay, that's fine. On the Dudley Library Subcommittee, where are we with this? So I heard you say, Chief Barrows, that the subcommittee will meet. So who's on the subcommittee? What is the schedule of meetings? What is the charge of the subcommittee? Can you?
Right, so the subcommittee was charged with looking at the possible fines for the Dudley Library branch project and returning recommendations to the committee. The subcommittee will be chaired by the chair of the BEC. There will be another BEC member on it. It will also have legal counsel. There will be staff present.
Do you have someone from the Boston Jobs Coalition on it?
Not from the Boston Jobs Coalition. There was a recommendation in the conversation we had, well, actually, she is from the Boston Jobs Coalition. There was a recommendation to have a community person on it.
Yes.
But that was the recommendation. It happens to be a person that is from the Boston Jobs Coalition, except we haven't contacted them yet. So it's
we
none.
did.
Did we?
She's
Excellent. We have
honored.
contacted her.
So
Yes.
Janet Jones.
Janet Jones.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I didn't know if we contacted her yet, but we did. Janet goes to all the BEC meetings.
Exactly. I
She's
think that's
well
great that she's
aware
on
of the trends, well aware of the conversation, and we wanted to make sure that we had a community voice on it. So Janet is going to be on it.
No, okay, and how long, what's the timeline for the subcommittee? Like, when are the recommendations going to be put forth?
Right, so the subcommittee essentially, the subcommittee is right after the May 7 launch. As soon as we have a comparison that we can put in front of the subcommittee to look at this project versus other projects, we want the subcommittee to meet, right? And then, so this project, so that this subcommittee can look at the totality of projects and begin to say, here is how we should be doing fines. And their charge is to come back to the BEC committee with a presentation and recommendation on fines.
So, great. And that's encouraging. One concern that I have is that the city is not doing enough to hold bad players accountable, and I think there are certain tools that we have in our toolbox, but I feel like we shy away from using those tools. So I'm looking forward to hearing the recommendations of the subcommittee of the BEC. Are those meetings open to the public?
Yes, they would in fact be open, under open meeting
Yes,
laws.
okay, and then, so the schedule of meetings will
They
be
will be
publicized?
noticed. That's right.
Exactly.
They will be
Okay.
noticed and then open.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I think that's it for now. I will give my colleagues an opportunity and come back if I have additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilor Janey. Chair recognizes Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Baker, and thank you to Councilor Edwards and to Councilor Janey, to the three councilors for your great work on this important issue, and to the panelists for your leadership and work as well. Prior to serving as a city council, I worked 10 years as a probation officer at Suffolk Superior Court, and I saw the tremendous role organized labor did play in helping people returning from jail or from prison. The Boston Building Trades and other unions really, for the Building Pathways program, really gave people a second chance, a third chance, and I think the program is excellent. I just wanted to highlight that for you. And one other issue that maybe you can comment on. I'm close with the immigrant community in my district, in Chinatown especially, working with the Chinese Progressive Association, but with the Chinese Community Labor United on wage theft issues. What happens if a company continues to steal wages from their workers? What is the role of the city on cracking down or ensuring that they can't continue doing that type of illegal behavior?
So first, I do think we should, we're going to invite Tren to this next meeting so that you can get a full picture of what's happening in that space. However, what I do know is if a company is engaging in some of those practices, and one thing I urge the support of the council on is to provide us the tools to be able to then use that information in making decisions on whether the company frankly does business with the city ever again, or in the next practice, right, until they can shore up that practice. And right now, the procurement laws do not afford the city the ability to weigh that information in the selection of a contract.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. And is there anything that I can do or the city council can do also in terms of helping our men and women that are returning from jail and prison that want to get more involved in the construction trades? What else can we do? Again, I know our labor unions are doing a great job, but is there anything specifically the city council can do to help you on any type of issues?
So we work closely with Operation Exit, and I think it's a really great program. They're starting a new, I forget what it's called, a new program that, because the way their program works is for people who are formerly incarcerated, but they have a new program that's working with people that are currently incarcerated and coming out. And so we're partnering with them so that we can get to know folks that are looking for work and keep them in mind for projects. But I think any efforts to support both their work and the Office of Returning Citizens, we work really closely with them. And I think it's a huge opportunity, and it's a great career builder for folks. So those are areas I would look into.
Thank you. And I guess my final comment, it's not a question, but can we make sure that we do some more outreach as well to our residents that are in public housing on this important issue? Maybe do some more recruiting drives. And, you know, I represent, along with my councilors here, a large percentage of people living in public housing. So that's an important issue for us to make sure that those residents as well have, you know, benefit in this boom in Boston economy. So whatever you could do to be helpful to our BHA residents, I know they'd greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you for your great work that you're doing on behalf of so many in the city.
Thank you, Councilor.
Okay, Counselor, you good?
Thank you, Councilor.
Can you talk about Operation Exit a little bit? How it's been going for 2 years, and placement numbers. What are the numbers of the placements through the Operation Exit?
I wouldn't have that available. That's something we can follow up on, because it's something we're in partnership with, and we present to them about the jobs bank. We get people signed up directly onto the computers, and we invite them to all these workshops that we're doing, but I don't know the numbers of their programming. I wouldn't have that available.
Maybe if we could get that conversion, how many people play? Because I saw a number someplace, and I thought it was a really good number, and we should get that out there.
Councilor, I agree. I think the number is pretty good. Let us get back to you with some hard numbers.
Councilor Edwards, do you have more questions?
Just to make sure I'm clear on what we're going to follow up with me offline. Well, my general comment is thank you. I really appreciate the update, the efforts, and I do want to acknowledge that I've seen that in your work, Selena, especially. I think it's great, Deputy Director. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do want, hopefully, to follow up on some actual dates and locations for the job banks to come. I represent Bunker Hill, the largest housing development in New England, and the casino comes there once a month, every first Tuesday, to recruit folks. One of the problems we've also seen with that recruitment is when East Boston folks come over there, there's the capacity concern, not just with the skill set, but with English, ELL. So if you're going to be providing certain things and services, the wait list is long. The city is doing a good job. Maybe another partner is the immigrant advancement. And making sure that we provide capacity, job-related capacity for English learners to make sure that they're coming as construction workers, ready to go, documents, everything. But one of the women didn't have the English capacity to clean rooms. So let's work on that total package. And then also we'll follow up specifically on the wage theft on the city property, but in general, how we're going to marry and monitor the best ways statutes or ordinances to amend for private and public. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Janey?
Yes. Thank you again. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on when we'll have those recommendations from the subcommittee. What's the timeline again?
So the subcommittee will meet shortly after the launch and I'm not sure, Counselor, if it will take 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, but I suspect there will be a quick return on Dudley itself and what should happen in Dudley, but Dudley will then set a precedence for how we address a number of other projects that, in fact, I think would probably fall under the same guise that Dudley is being fined for.
And that's helpful, I guess, and I don't take my sense of urgency as me wanting to rush the process and do a sloppy job with the process, but I do think it's important to have more clarity around what the scope, the charge, and the timeline of when we can have this work completed. So I don't know if it's 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings, but I think it's important to really kind of think that through, and not just because we want to have these recommendations. I think you also want to respect people's time. These are all people who are doing this on a volunteer basis, and they need to know what they're committing to. So that's number one. I want to make sure that we are doing more, and I'm certainly happy to work with all of you around building this pipeline. I think it's incredibly important. I wonder, you know, when I talk with anyone, whether it's monitoring the jobs or meeting with development teams or talking about community benefits, the importance of making sure that we're doing more to pay it forward around jobs and building that pipeline. I wonder what opportunities are available for Madison Park High School students, for example. Would love for your office to be thinking about that as well as we're talking about Jobs Bank, as we're talking about pipeline development, how we're really kind of tapping into that. And then finally, just how really important this is. I think it was the last hearing that we had on this topic where it was shared that there's $9 billion in construction happening currently, another $6 billion in the pipeline. We're talking $15 billion. Though that is probably now not even the accurate number. It's probably even more than that now, possibly more than that. And we need to make sure that that $15 billion is going into the hands, to the pockets, to the households of people in this city, people of color, and women. And so I look forward to our continued work together with my colleagues on the council, but with all of you as well, and making sure that we're doing exactly that, as well as all of the folks in the public who have been amazing advocates on this issue. So I think that's it for questions. I'm looking forward to hearing the public testimony, if that's where we're going next. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Councilor
Thank you
Janey.
again for your work.
And just a suggestion, we're ordered to have updates in April and October. We should probably proactively set an October meeting
Yep.
between,
Yep.
probably maybe Ron, or we can figure that out. We'll proactively set in October. And if I can ask, if you guys can just remain seated for a little while. We only have 3 people that are testifying, so there might be some sort of question that you guys could help. So with that being said, I'd like to invite down, I think it's Derek Monks or D. Monks? Dick Monks. Would you like to come over here and Don Carlson and Chuck Turner, Councilor Turner?
Chairman Baker, as they come down, I'd like to excuse myself only because we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the first sister city agreement ever signed here in Boston with the city of Kyoto, Japan.
Oh, wow.
And the mayor of Kyoto, Japan is upstairs, and we're about to kick off the signing ceremony at 2 o'clock. And so
Excellent.
if
How do we get
I'll
a delegation
I'll
over
stay up
to
until
Kyoto?
2 o'clock, just so I can hear as much as possible.
Yeah.
But if you,
Well, you have a qualified
team is
staff here,
here,
John.
very
We can
yes.
handle that. We can handle that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if you can get to Japan, if any chance you get to Japan, get there.
Hello, my name is Dick Monks. I'm going to read a prepared statement, which I have copies for you all. I just first want to start by saying I'm encouraged by the atmosphere of this meeting, that it's really a work meeting. We're not just getting data and information and see you in 6 months. That's very, very encouraging from both sides, the panel here as well as the councilors. and also going and looking, and I'm going to addressing specifically the issue around Boston residents, which I think already has been highlighted as a concern around the whole policy, BRJP policy. So again, thank you, Councilor Baker, Cheney, and Edwards for having this timely session. Again, my name is Dick Monks. I'm a Boston resident. I'm a member and activist of City Life Feeder Urbana, and also the City Life representative on the steering committee of the Boston Jobs Coalition. It is in that capacity that I am making these remarks. My focus will be on the status of the Boston residency piece of the BRJP compliance requirements. I'd like to start with a very short history, though it has been referenced earlier today. In the 50s and 60s, the building trades union's base was predominantly white and male and Boston residents. By the 1970s, however, that base, though remaining mostly white and male, no longer were Boston residents. The move, or some would call flight, to the suburbs was widespread, especially in white neighborhoods. The first incarnation of the community's fight for a Boston residency jobs policy in the 1970s was developed to address the lack of diversity and residency with the same three categories: Boston residents, people of color, and women, as we are today. And we will find today that though people of color have increased their numbers in the construction industry, they still are not meeting today's standards, and women, from virtually no representation in the 70s, have had a slow and steady increase, but still fall short, dramatically short, of doing the 12% of the work as required by the current BRJP, while during that time, Boston residents have had almost no growth in the compliance numbers. The current BRJP calls for 51% of hours worked to be performed by Boston workers. The data that is available shows that on all projects, whether union or non-union, the numbers fall from 20 to even 30% below the required 51%. Why is that? How can that be? With both people of color and female numbers rising, why aren't Boston resident numbers up as well? We believe that raising the residency work hours are key to making compliance more than just a wishful and good-intentioned ordinance. This is the problem we are asking the City Council to address through these hearings. The building trades unions, the primary provider of labor for much of Boston's construction industry, are aware of these discrepancies and have many training and apprenticeship programs and outreach practices in place, trying to deal with this problem. The non-union sector, which has a growing presence during this current Boston building boom, has, for the most part, very little in place in terms of training and outreach. We therefore are requesting that this biannual City Council review of the BRJP ask the hard questions to both the union and the non-union sectors as to why this lack of compliance is so consistently poor. Solving the problem of the low numbers of Boston residents actually working to build the new Boston is not an easy fix. We know there is no one answer or a simple solution to this problem. It's multifaceted, and we are also aware that many of you, as we've heard today, have been grappling with it for some time now. We have a suggestion. The one suggestion we have in doing this yearly evaluation is that you, and I really mean we, set real, seemingly achievable goals, both short-term and long-term. We all want full compliance. That's the long-term goal. But when the current numbers are 20 or even 30% below the requirement, achieving success can be overwhelming. But by setting yearly, short-term goals of, say, 3 to 5% increases in all compliance categories, we can better track our progress, better evaluate what efforts are effective and what efforts are not, and then shape our programs going forward with some certainty that we are heading in the right direction. Excuse me. This means, of course, that attention must be paid as to the numbers and demographics of the current pool of construction workers. Then we can see a year-to-year basis, a year later, how much or less progress has been made. We can only evaluate if we look deeply into these numbers to see what changes have been made. We do this yearly evaluation to improve, not to blame. These hearings are bringing all the stakeholders together, though I'm a little surprised and disappointed that that's only slightly true today, to solve a problem, not just to review and lament on how little progress is actually happening. And yes, we should praise the successes and the progress that has been made, but that's only part of the work. We can do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monks. Dawn Carlson.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Carlson. I'm a resident of Boston. I was born in Boston. I'm a representative of the NAACP on the Boston Jobs Coalition. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Boston Jobs Coalition. In January 2017, as you all know, Mayor Walz signed an ordinance raising the BRJP standard for employing Boston residents on covered projects from 50 to 51%. The standard for people of color from 25 to 40%, a big change, and the standard for women from 10 to 12%. Sadly, even with this new ordinance and these new standards, the poor results against the BRJP standards leading up to 2017 have not budged. We might conclude that ordinances don't solve the problem. In 2018, among the 5 million construction worker hours logged on DIP projects, the biggest category of covered projects, only 26% of hours were logged by Boston residents, versus the 51% standard. 29.9% of the hours were logged by people of color versus the 40% standard, and 5.4% of hours were logged by women versus the 12% standard. We see the same pattern in 2017, 2016, 2015. No change, no change. The results have been flat. The 1.2 million hours logged on the public projects did better against the standard for people of color, but still felt way short of the standards for Boston residents and women. Veterans of this effort can tell you this problem goes back a whole lot further. I recognize that lots of people are involved in this BRJP compliance process, but what we are doing today clearly is not working. I can imagine coming to this hearing 3, 4, 5 years from now and seeing the same sad results. Something different needs to be done by everyone with a role in the system. We think that construction trade unions are key. They provide more than 95% of the workers on the DIP projects, and across the 25 or so unions, they vary dramatically in how poorly they meet the standards. Some of the in meeting the Boston resident standards, some are at 30%, some are 10%, 12, 13%. What can the unions do? Here are a few ideas. There are certainly many more. First, if they have roadblocks in bringing in Boston residents, people of color and women, identify what those roadblocks are, union by union, okay, and standard by standard. They're different. Each union is different. Each standard is different. Each union meeting a standard is different. And figure out how to break through those roadblocks. These are not problems unique to the world. This can be done. Secondly, they can analyze the actions they do take today to bring in these classes of workers, and they do take actions. They can accelerate the actions that are working, kill off the ones that aren't. Thirdly, since some unions come much closer to meeting the standards than others, determine what those unions are doing right and replicate those actions in the unions that are doing poorly. There's lessons to be learned right across all the unions. They could apply those lessons. But the unions are not the only players. All the contractors have an obligation to dig deeper to figure out how to meet the standard. They need to be motivated to do so. Open shop contractors in particular have the control in their hiring to meet the standards. They need to dig more deeply. The BRJP staff and the BEC can decide that this poor level of compliance has gone on long enough and build in a little more fire under the people who can really change the results. The city supports only 2 small training programs in the construction trades. They've been mentioned here today. They're small. You asked for the numbers. They're small. They could do more. The city should recognize the economic value to the city, just to the city, not of the people, just to the city, of preparing a person for a well-paying job in the building trades who is now unemployed or underemployed or heading for a dead-end job. Does the city or the state provide access to unemployed Boston construction workers? Beyond the jobs bank, are there unemployed Boston construction workers that are tagged someplace else in a state system or a city system? Are those workers given access to the unions and the employers? I just don't know. We haven't asked that question. And then there's the city council. Okay, here you are conducting this hearing. Thank you, thank you. We're most appreciative. What's your purpose in doing so? Hopefully it is to achieve compliance with the BRJP standards that are so important to so many Bostonians. You have an opportunity here to take leadership across these involved entities. There's a lot of involved entities. And shake things up. Set a new path of compliance. Get us out of the rut we're in. I hope you take it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Councilor Turner?
Thank you. My name is Chuck Turner. I'm from Roxbury, and I had the pleasure of being part of the group that decided in the 70s to suggest a policy that would lead to Boston workers of all races and genders, getting a fair share of the construction that was going on then. We were concerned that the policy would not have be able to focus on the extent to which Boston workers, workers of color, and women were being hired because of the fact that the unions at that point didn't have enough workers in those categories to have the policy evaluated on the basis of those standards, and the non-union sector had the same problem. And as we watched the policy move forward over the years, we assumed that in both of those sectors there would be a growth in numbers so that one day, today, some 40 years later, we would be able to judge performance not just on the basis of what the contractors are doing, but whether the numbers are there because we have enough workers in Boston who meet those categories to use that as a standard. When we, the Boston Jobs Coalition, sat down in 2014 to think about how to revise the ordinance in order to make it stronger as the work was constantly flowing higher, we said, well, we can't use the compliance around the numbers because the union sector and the non-union sector still don't have enough workers who meet those categories. So we can't use those, but what we can do is to build into the ordinance a set of standards that the contractors and the developers have to meet, because the members of BJC have had decades of experience of dealing with the contractors and developers. And we know that while some are very serious about it, others aren't serious, and that the administration had nothing that they could do in terms of the contractors who were not serious, because there was nothing in the ordinance that spoke to their responsibilities or sanctions if they didn't respond. So we built that into the draft that we gave to the mayor because we thought it was the next step forward in terms of thinking. He agreed, and the staff Carolyn, Chris, others really built what we felt was a very strong ordinance that had 7 standards in them that made sense, and a process around those standards that made sense, and sanctions if the standards weren't met. Our concern today is that the process around the new ordinance started in the field in 2018. We're now in 2019, almost into May, and there hasn't been one sanction. We don't believe that sanctioning is the answer, but we believe that having contractors and developers take those issues seriously is a significant part of the answer. So we think we were pleased this afternoon to hear a discussion about how the city administration is going to move forward to develop a practice around the sanctioning of contractors who don't comply with those standards. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it's 2 years later since the ordinance was passed, and 2.5 years later almost, and it's really time to move forward. Work is going on. There are billions of dollars that are being made, and so we just urge the administration and the city to move forward quickly on making sure that the sanction issue is being dealt with. The other point that I'd like to just briefly touch on, given the discussion by Dick and Don, is the issue of the lack of a fair share of the work for Boston workers of all races and genders. It was the concern that led to our developing a ordinance. After the ordinance passed in 2017, we developed another ordinance, an ordinance that would bring the union sector and the non-union sector to come before the city through the ordinance and discuss the issue of the recruiting and training of Boston workers of all races and genders. Because if we're going to have this policy met, there have to be enough workers, in fact, to have the standards met. And that isn't there now. And Boston workers, the Boston community, is losing millions and millions of dollars of wages because of the lack of that. We suggested an ordinance. There has been a hearing on that ordinance. Given the concerns that were raised around the ordinance, we suggested to the unions that we should draw back and have a conversation. And we are having those conversations. And those conversations are spurring us to think about whether we should be open and thinking about other approaches than the ordinance approach, which the unions really don't think is the correct approach. As we've looked at it, a final decision hasn't been made. But we think, as we look at it, we think perhaps this committee, the only aspect of city government that provides the public a chance to look at, hear, and then testify about what's happening on these critically important issues, that perhaps this committee is really the appropriate place for that conversation that we were thinking of having through an ordinance to take place. You know, you are the body that sets the policies around the standards. You are deeply concerned about them. So why should we set up an ordinance that brings a committee that you would appoint in to deal with it? Why don't we think about the position of asking you to, in fact, play the role that we were looking to the ordinance to play, We know the unions don't want the ordinance, and so why put something on them that they are adamantly opposed to if your committee could accomplish the same objective, which is your objective. You're here to look at how to make compliance better. The ordinance was being set up to have a dialogue between a commission appointed by you all with the unions and the non-union sector to look at how to do it better. And as we're looking at now, we think that perhaps we should pull back from the ordinance and just ask you to, in fact, make a part of these biannual hearings that are required by law, by ordinance, be the place where that discussion takes place, where a union representative and non-union representatives come and discuss what standards, what incremental standards they are going to set for the coming year. And that that at the, say at the April or at the October session, and then at the April session, come back and just report on how's it moving forward, what problems can be seen. And then at the October session, the next October session, say what happened, where the strengths were, where the problems were, and what revisions can be made for the coming year. So we think it would really be very important for you as the committee, the city's committee for accountability around this program, to think about whether you are the body that should be playing the role that we saw the ordinance playing, and whether the unions and the non-union sector should be expected to come and share a portion of the time of each of those hearings to talk about the extent to which there is compliance around Boston workers. Compliance particularly around moving the compliance on Boston workers up. If this policy is not assuring that Boston workers get a fair share, it's failed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turner. Can I just have one quick question here? When we talk about the hours, you get an actual hours worked, but then they're broken down into categories. Is it possible that 1 hour is being charged 3 times, or can you talk to me about how that would work out? So if a Boston resident woman of color is on the Dudley Library and she works 1 hour, is that hour actually being charged 3 times?
That's correct. If the person is from Boston, a person of color, female, that 1 hour counts in all 3 categories.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Councilor Edwards?
Just another follow-up. We want to make sure that the trainers that you're picking are also diverse. I didn't hear, I'm sure they are, but I didn't hear that in terms of who's doing your OSHA 10s, who's doing your CSLs. So you don't have to give me the data now. I'm sure that you are, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity also to employ, create partnership, make sure the trainers reflect the diversity you're trying to create.
Yeah, we absolutely look to that, and we also always provide food. That's one of our practices for our workshops, and we hire exclusively minority-owned, resident-owned businesses from the neighborhood where we're doing our workshops as well.
Could we add also at some point for the workshops, especially when we can go to the neighborhoods and babysitting?
Yeah, so
partnership,
we have
I think that would be huge in terms of your recruitment for women, is some form of childcare. I know at the meetings I had, there was someone to partner with. There's a local co-op. There's somebody, 509 coordinates. They organize the childcare in-home facilities, but they're childcare workers. It's a whole union. Many of them are women, or most of them are women, most of them people of color, but still there's opportunities to partner with already organized care to provide at least for this 2-3 hours that you're doing the trainings. I think that would be a huge bolster in your numbers.
Yeah, it's something we've looked at right now. We have child-friendly, and so we have activities for the kids to do. The childcare is a bit more complex given all the licensing required, so we're trying to figure out if there's a way to do that in partnership with BCYF or something. But it's something that we do want to meet that standard, but in the meantime, we're child-friendly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Counselor Janey?
Yeah, just briefly, on the payroll, filing of the payroll again, do we have a sense of, and if you don't have the numbers this morning, that's fine, but I'd like to have that data if you could, just how many are out of compliance in terms of turning in payroll, how late it actually is, and what analysis do we have in terms of the types of companies that are turning in late payroll? Is it the smaller companies that need some backroom support? Are there other players who are not doing a good job in that area? So if you could provide that, that would be helpful, particularly as we're looking to really tighten up and strengthen things in your office in terms of this new platform. I think looking at that payroll, looking at the pipeline development, looking at the jobs banks, making sure that we have a way to track and really ensure that we're getting to the desired outcomes that we all want to see. I think that's important. So I would just ask that. And thank you for talking to the concrete company. I would suggest that there's another concrete company that gets a bunch of work that needs a talking to as well. So perhaps bringing them in. I'm sure you know who I mean. So thank you. And again, thank you for all your work that you do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and just a couple more questions. So, so the concrete work is primarily laborers, so out of 223 or one of those unions, am I correct? Do they have laborers, and would there be carpenters on
They have
those?
carpenters
On those
as well.
carpenters and laborers primarily?
Carpenters, laborers, cement finishers.
Yeah,
And some equipment operators.
all right, so
well.
that's a pretty good spectrum there. Okay, and I know, just like 2 more minutes, the training programs that we're working with, the building pathways, so they're brick and mortar, they would use the union halls of the union training centers. Youth Works, they have a training facility right there in Mission Hill, do they, are they, so like training for carpentry, training for electrical and those sort of things? Are we working with, do we have access to, in the city of Boston, any other brick and mortar low-entry training facilities that would be training towards the trades or training towards even that low-skilled laborer that you're talking to, anything that we work with now?
Well, I know that we partner with Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
They are pushing out like HVAC workers, certification, electrical, and some other mechanical trades.
But do they don't really, I think we have an opportunity here, and just something to get in your mind, that if we're taking that a lower bar entry, meaning it isn't necessarily sign up for Benjamin Franklin or even Youth Build, someplace a drop by, a stop-off place where, you know, we're teaching people how to work, and then that entry level becomes building pathways, becomes, you know, I think we need to start as a city looking at that, where we're training brick and mortar, you know, and it could be carpentry, it could be these other things, but we have to have people be able to come in and we know who we're dealing with, because we're also, I believe, missing out on the opportunity of the private development that's happening, that smaller development that's happening in all of our neighborhoods, because those are the people that I see and talk to a lot that can't find people to do the work. We talked to her, someone mentioned about trying to find a female plumber. Just try and find a plumber, never mind a female plumber, you know? So and that's it. That was just more of a comment, and thank you for coming today, and thank you for all the work we're doing, and we'll set something up for October. With that, this hearing is, everybody's good?
Yep.
Everybody's good. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.